Here we are. Very good. So, Hare Krishna. Today we'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 39. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tatu Jayam Udirayet. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nashta Prayesh Abadeshru Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utam Ashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. All right. So we begin with Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 39. Grivayam jana lokosya tapoloka stanat bat murda bitsatya lokastu brahma loka sanatana. Translation: from the forefront of the chest up to the neck of the universal form of the Lord are situated the planetary systems named Janaloka and Tapoloka, whereas Satyaloka, the topmost planetary system, is situated on the head of the form. The spiritual planets, however, are eternal. So the purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Many times in these pages, we have discussed the spiritual planets situated beyond the material sky, and the description is corroborated in this verse. The word sanatana is significant. This very idea of eternity is expressed in the Bhagavad Gita, where it is said that beyond the material creation is the spiritual sky, where everything is eternal. Sometimes Satyaloka, the planet in which Brahma resides, is also called Brahmaloka. But the Brahmaloka mentioned here is not the same as the Satyaloka planetary system. This Brahmaloka is eternal, whereas the Satyaloka planetary system is not eternal. And to distinguish between the two, the adjective sanatana has been used in this case. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, this Brahmaloka is the loka or abode of Brahman, or the Supreme Lord. In the spiritual sky, all the planets are as good as the Lord Himself. The Lord is all spirit, and His name, fame, glories, qualities, pastimes, etc. are all non-different from Him because He is absolute. As such, the planets in the kingdom of God are also non-different from Him. In those planets, there is no difference between the body and the soul, nor is there any influence of time as we experience it in the material world. And in addition to there being no influence of time, the planets in Brahmaloka, due to being spiritual, are never annihilated. All the variegatedness in the spiritual planets is also one with the Lord, and therefore the Vedic aphorism Ekam Evad Vityam is fully realized in that Sanatana atmosphere of spiritual variegatedness. This material world is only a shadow phantasmagoria of the spiritual kingdom of the Lord, and because it is a shadow, it is never eternal. The variegatedness in the material world of duality, spirit and matter, cannot be compared to that of the spiritual world. Because of a poor fund of knowledge, less intelligent persons sometimes mistake the conditions of the shadow world to be equivalent to those of the spiritual world. And thus they mistake the Lord and his pastimes in the material world to be one with the conditioned souls and their activities. The Lord condemns such less intelligent persons in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 11. Avajananti mam mudha manushim tanum ashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshvaram. Whenever the Lord incarnates, he does so in his full internal potency, Atma Maya, and less intelligent persons mistake him to be one of the material creations. Srila Sridhara Swami, therefore, rightly commenting on this verse, says that the Brahmaloka mentioned here is Vaikunta, the kingdom of God, which is Sanatana, or eternal, and is therefore not exactly like the material creations described above. The Virat, universal form of the Lord, is an imagination for the material world. It has nothing to do with the spiritual world or the kingdom of God. Okay, so to repeat the translation of text 39. From the forefront of the chest up to the neck of the universal form of the Lord are situated the planetary systems named Janaloka and Tapoloka, whereas Satyaloka, the topmost planetary system, is situated on the head of the form. The spiritual planets, however, are eternal. Okay, so of course, I find this very confusing between what is a spiritual planet and what is a material planet. And Brahmaloka here is mentioned as being a spiritual planet, or as being a material planet, depending on how it's being looked at. So I find this a bit confusing. However, the thing that sticks out, of course, is that the Lord Himself is all spirit, and even these ways of viewing the Lord, like in the Virat Rupa, or the different, also these different ways of seeing the planets as like different parts of the body, these are all illusion, to help us to understand. Um, so that's what the phantasmagoria of the spiritual kingdom of the Lord is, the material world, because it's a shadow and it's never eternal. So that's what sticks out for me and what I can remember out of this verse, and I find the rest about the planetary systems and the what planets are, what systems are material and what systems are spiritual, to be a bit confusing. So at this point, I will ask Mataji Lavanga, if she can help to clarify this a little bit.
Well, it says on here in the purport that that uh sometimes Satyaloka, the planet in which Brahma resides, is also called Brahmaloka. But Brahmaloka mentioned here is not the same as the Satyaloka planetary system. This Brahmaloka is eternal, whereas the Satyaloka planetary system is not eternal. So what basically I'm understanding from this is that sometimes people will use Satyaloka and Brahmaloka interchangeably, but the actual planetary system of Satyaloka, that goes away with the material manifestation when that's annihilated. But the Brahmaloka itself, the actual planet, that's an eternal planetary system. Even though even though that it's not technically considered Goloka Vrindavan. So I mean that's the best way that I can understand it. So as Prabhupada was trying to make the clarification that even though they're used interchangeably, they're not technically the same thing. One part is devastated with the annihilation, and then the Brahmaloka planet is not. And also, I've heard the same thing about the planet of Dhruva Maharaj, that that planet also kind of stays and it's not annihilated. So, there are just some things that are eternal and some things that are not. Why? I don't, ask Krishna, so yeah, I mean that's the best way I can explain it for now. But I can look a little bit more into it and see what else I can find. But yeah, I mean there's a lot to the whole Vedic cosmology. But the ultimate point that I think I was taking away from this purport is that again, what's being described here is the Virat Rupa, or the universal form of the Lord. So it's giving one a way in which they can understand these planetary systems and how they're ultimately all coming from Krishna. But throughout the purport, you see Prabhupada, he's making a distinction between the material and the spiritual. So, for example, he's saying, like time itself, is non-existent in the spiritual planets because they're spiritual, versus time exists here. So, from this, it was making me think that we know that Krishna is unlimited, and everything's coming from Krishna. So, if Krishna is unlimited, then a place where time exists and a place where time doesn't exist also have to come from him. Otherwise, then the whole case that Krishna himself is unlimited doesn't actually work. But yeah, so even though the main text of this verse is talking about the universal form, Prabhupada, he at this same time in his purport, he spends the whole purport basically kind of like comparing the two, the material and the spiritual energy, so that we understand the distinction, so that we don't actually think that it's just all one. Because hearing this text that let me go back up to it, that from the forefront of the chest up to the neck of the universal form of the Lord are situated the planetary systems. So one could hear this and think that it's kind of all one. So so in this way, I think that's why Prabhupada, he spends most of the time making this distinction so that we can better understand. Like he says here, the Lord is all spirit. His name, fame, glories, qualities, pastimes, etc., are all not different from him because he's absolute. And then he's talking about the planets in the kingdom of God. So there are different points that could be brought out in this purport, but that's just kind of what stuck out to me the most.
Yes,
And do you
thank
have
you.
something that you would like to add?
I yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add first before Amy speaks as well that we've been discussing over the past weeks some of the material planets, and so it's important for us to realize, like and here, that the material planets are not eternal. That there's some place that maybe one would choose to go, but it's not the end goal, because they're not eternal, and they can be we can get caught up in the material planets, but what we're really supposed to be striving for is the spiritual planets. So
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for
yeah,
bringing that back up,
since
Yumone.
we've been discussing that a bit
Yeah,
lately, I thought I would bring that back in. Amy,
very
you can
So it called my attention also, mostly the same thing that you were speaking about, Brahma Loka, and there's one that's material and one that's not eternal and one that's eternal. And it says at the end of the purport that the Brahmaloka spoken here is Vaikunta, the kingdom of God, which is eternal, and the or Sanatana. And it's not exactly like the material creations described above. And then it speaks about the Virat universal form of the Lord is an imagination for the material world. And it brought to mind that in Canto 1 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the translation of the verse says that the conception of the Virat universal form of the Lord as appearing in the material world is imaginary. It is to enable the less intelligent and neophytes to adjust the idea of the Lord's having form, but factually, the Lord has no material form. And then in the purport, it goes on to explain that the Virat Rupa is conceived for those who are just neophyte worshippers, because for them, the material Virat Rupa is presented, and it will be explained here in the second canto. So this would be now. And the Virat Rupa, the material manifestations of different planets, have been conceived as his legs, hands, etc. And those descriptions are for the neophytes. So it brought to mind that description of that Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, 330. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Yes, we mentioned that briefly at the beginning. Um, if you have any more comments, or would you like to go on to read the next text, Lavanga?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of that verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, "Earth, water, fire, air, ether all constitute my energies as well." And then he also says, everything emanates from me. But what this section of the Bhagavatam does is it gives like a picture of really how one can see that everything is coming from Krishna, because you hear about like the material and the spiritual, and then some might not want to accept the form of the Lord because every form that they've seen is temporary or has defects. So it's actually very intelligent. On the I mean, Krishna, he's a genius that he lays this out, for everybody, so that everybody can like, so even if you're not at the point that you can understand, okay, well, just like at least imagine this to make you open up to the idea. So I'm just appreciating that aspect as well. But that's all I have.
Very good. So, welcome to Bactina Abbey. Um, can you go on, Mother Lavanga, with Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 40 and 41?
Yes. Tatkatyam katalam kliptam urubhyam vitalam vibho janubhyam sutalam suram yang yabhyam tu talatalam Mahatalam tu gulpabhyam prapad prapadabhyam rasatalam patalam paratalata iti loka maya puman. My dear son Narada, know from me that there are 7 lower planetary systems out of the total 14. The first planetary system, known as Atala, is situated on the waist. The second, Vitala, is situated on the thighs. The third, Sutala, on the knees. The fourth, Tala, 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 on the shanks. The fifth, Mahatala, on the ankles. The sixth, Rasatala, on the upper portion of the feet. The seventh, Patala, on the soles of the feet. Thus, the Virat form of the Lord is full of all planetary systems. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Modern enterprises, enterprisers, the astronauts who travel in space, may take information from Srimad Bhagavatam that in space there are 14 divisions of planetary systems. This situation is calculated from the earthly planetary system, which is called Burloka. Above Burloka, there is Bhuvarloka. The topmost planetary system is called, and the topmost planetary system is called Satyaloka. These are the upper 7 lokas or planetary systems. And similarly, there are 7 lower planetary systems known as Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Tala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala lokas. All these planetary systems are scattered all over the complete universe, which occupies an area of 2 billion times 2 billion square miles. The modern astronauts can travel only a few thousand miles away from the Earth, and therefore their attempt to travel in the sky is something like child's play on the shore of an expansive ocean. The moon is situated in the 3rd status of the upper planetary system. And in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we shall be able to know the distinct situation of the various planets scattered over the vast material sky. There are innumerable universes beyond the one in which we are put, and all these material universes cover only an insignificant portion of the spiritual sky, which is described above as Sanatana, Brahma Loka. The Supreme Lord, I'm sorry, my phone went off the page. Hold on one second. The Supreme Lord very kindly invites the intelligent human beings to return home back to Godhead in the following verse of Bhagavad Gita 8:16. Abrahma bhuvana loka purnam arvartino juna mam upayatya tu konteya purna janmana vidyate. Beginning from Satyaloka, the topmost planet of the universe, situated just below the eternal Brahmaloka, as described above, all the planets are material, and one's situation in any of the many material planets is still subject to the laws of material nature, namely birth, death, old age, and disease. But one can get complete liberation from all the above mentioned material pains when one enters into the eternal Brahmaloka, Sanatana atmosphere, the kingdom of God. Therefore, liberation, as contemplated by the speculative philosophers and mystics, is possible only when one becomes a devotee of the Lord. Anyone who is not a devotee cannot enter into the kingdom of God. Only by attainment of a service attitude in the transcendental position can one enter into the kingdom of Godhead. Therefore, the speculative philosophers, as well as the mystics, must first of all be attracted to the devotional cult before they can factually attain liberation. So I'll read that verse again. My dear son Narada, know from me that there are 7 lower planetary systems added to the total 14. The first planetary system, known as Atala, is situated on the waist. The second, Vitala, is situated on the thighs. The third, Sutala, on the knees. The fourth, Talatala, on the shanks. The fifth, Mahatala, on the ankles. The sixth, Rasatala, on the upper portion of the feet. And the 7th, Patala, on the soles of the feet. Thus, the Virat form of the Lord is full of all planetary systems. So, did you want to comment first, or did you want me to? Okay, all right, okay, just making sure. Okay, so Prabhupada, I like in the very first part of this purport, Prabhupada's making the point that wait, hold on. That the astronauts who travel in space may take information from Srimad Bhagavatam that there are 14 divisions of planetary systems. Because, it seems like there's always some like new discovery or something like new going on. Like they're not really sure um what everything is like. Like for example, when I was a kid, we had this song, put the planets in a line, count them 1 through 9. And they would do this to like teach us the names of the planets in our solitary system. It was a little cassette tape, you know, like back in the 90s when everyone had cassette tapes. And I was like maybe like 5. And they had these songs to teach us about the planets, right? So you get to the last one and then it's Pluto. And then I get to high school and then they tell me Pluto's not a planet. And then they tell me like, oh yeah, my bad. Like we were wrong, you know, it's not really a planet. And even when I was in elementary school, they were actually teaching us that not only was there Pluto, but there was another planet beyond Pluto called Planet X, you know, and you know, ever since then I've never heard of Planet X. And I've never and now they're telling me that they were wrong about Pluto. And then, you know, I had just read that, oh, they found way off in a distant galaxy. I read this a few years ago. A planet that resembled Earth, you know, like exactly like Earth. And there was even like pictures of it, and it looked like a somewhat like an Earth or whatever. And then I just looked up yesterday because whenever I pull up my internet browser, Mukunda has it on the function that it tells you like what the daily news is from like MSN or whatever. And then one of the news headlines was, okay, well, actually, close to Earth, there's a planet that resembles Earth. You know, so so but I never heard any more about you know the planet I had read about years ago off in distant galaxies that resembles Earth. So what I'm trying to get with this is that you know it just made me laugh when I read this from Prabhupada that you know the astronauts they can take information from Bhagavatam that there's these 14 planetary systems because you know it seems like you know they're trying to figure it out you know from their senses and what we know from Shish Upanishad and the other books of Prabhupada is that one of the defects of the human being is that we have imperfect senses and we have the tendency to commit mistakes and the tendency to be illusioned and even the tendency to cheat others. So when you combine these all together, you can understand why, you know, things are always changing in terms of like what, you know, what people think is in the universe or what it's supposed to look like. And but then ultimately, I appreciate how, you know, Prabhupada, he kind of just, you know, we've been talking about these different planetary systems for a few verses now. But Prabhupada, he always finds a way to kind of bring things back home where, you know, really it doesn't matter if you're in the upper ones or if you're in the lower ones. And I don't think this has been discussed in detail yet, but it's going to be, especially when we get to the fifth canto, that when you're in the upper planetary systems, the material enjoyment there is much greater than it is on Earth. And when you're in the lower planetary systems, the suffering there is kind of much greater than it is on Earth. But no matter which one you're in, whether it's the lower ones or whether it's the upper ones, or whether you're in the or whether you're in the Earth planet, you still have to deal with these problems of birth, death, old age, and disease. And one of the things that my Bhakti Bhavan teacher brought out, Param, Param, Param Prabhu, he said, you know, that our acharyas basically summarize all material sufferings into birth, death, old age, and disease. But we ourselves, we actually create so much other sufferings beyond that by you know how we live our lives and you know like sufferings of like oh this technology doesn't work or you know this is not going right you know so by artificial living we've created more sufferings just other than these four but that's kind of like beyond the point but I just thought I would bring that up but anyway but Prabhupada ultimately he's bringing it back home that where whichever one you're in you're gonna have to deal with these four things and these are the sufferings of life. So therefore, he's saying that you know liberation Even when not only they're contemplating how the material universe is structured, but even liberation, as philosophers are contemplating it, as mystics are contemplating it, that's only really possible when one becomes a devotee of Krishna. Because when you're not a devotee of Krishna, when you don't understand things as they are, then any other form of liberation is ultimately going to take you somewhere temporary within this material universe. Um, whether you go to Brahmaloka or whether you go to some other type of planet, or either whether you get impersonal liberation, that itself is going to be temporary. So the ultimate situation is that if one wants to really get free from all these things and all types of sufferings, is that they have to take to devotional service. So yeah, I really appreciate how Prabhupada kind of brings it back home at the end of this purport, so that one doesn't get, kind of bewildered by hearing about these different planets. Oh, well, what's here and what's there, and what's this planet like? Even though it actually, I've heard about it, and it is nice to hear about, just for one's own knowledge. But one at the same time has to understand that even if you go to these places, you're still going to have problems. And so that's how Prabhupada ends the purport. And Prabhupada, his mood is very much like that. He's always like, he'll explain something and then just bring it back to the original point of surrender to Krishna and go back to Godhead. So that's some thoughts I had on this verse. Mother Yamuna, would you like to comment?
Yes, very, very good insights there. Um, all of these visuals about the different parts of the body, and it's all very interesting. I guess it's there all to help us to try to understand this the Virat Rupa form of the Lord. Um, so I don't know. I really don't get much more out of it because the details are the question is how important are the details of each of these things if it's all illusion, right? And the most important thing is to remember that we're supposed to be going back to Godhead. So I don't really have any more comments on this verse, and I open it up now for either Bhaktin Amy or Bhaktin Abby to make some comments.
Bhakti Abby, would you like to say something?
Hare Krishna, because I'm joining a little late, I would prefer if you would like to speak first and then I'll speak last if that's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, honestly, all I wanted to do was share from the Bhagavad Gita that I have. I'm trying to find the Virat Rupa for there it is. Let me see if I can do that. I don't know if you guys can see that. That's like the Virat Rupa form of Lord Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. And I just wanted to like add to the conversation on the Virat Rupa there with that. Was that good enough to see? Even in
Yeah.
the Virat Rupa,
Yes.
there's the Paramatma too. That's all I wanted to, share with you guys regarding that because everything was perfect.
And it's nice that you brought that up to Amy, that within the Virat Rupa, there's the Paramama. I'm not sure if that's going to be mentioned in this chapter because I don't remember all the verses, but I
There's
know
only
it's
one more
another.
verse left, and it's a very short one. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll just say this. I mean, it might be brought up later, but the Paramatma, that's something that's also within the material world, So like, that's one of the things I had learned when I joined, that like Krishna resides as Paramatma in the heart of every living entity within the material world, but that's not necessarily like the case in the spiritual world.
Abby?
Hare Krishna, can you please remind me what does Virat Rupa mean?
Universal form.
Oh, okay. Are we in the part of the Bhagavatam where it says like, and you can imagine his bones are like the mountains? Is this that same part?
That was before. Now we're discussing how the planets are situated within the
Okay.
Lord's form.
I remember when I first read this, I was like really confused by this description. I was like, how are we supposed to meditate on this form? And then somewhere in the purport, I think Prabhupada says that like meditating on like this form of the Lord is for the impersonalists, and it's better for us to meditate on the personal form of Krishna. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. That's mentioned.
So yeah, so I remember when I read that, I was like reading so much and then I was like, how am I supposed to meditate on this? And then finally I read, oh, you're not really supposed to, you're okay, you can just think about Krishna, and like that clarified that for me. One thing I like that you mentioned is in the end how Prabhupada brings the purport like back to just like devotional service to Krishna. But something I kind of realized recently is because like all of the like complicated details, they don't really appeal to me, but like they appeal to other people. Like I was talking to my coworker and he likes to like speculate about the universe or whatever. And so I started telling him about like the upper and lower planetary systems, and like he thought that was really cool, and then he bought a bunch of books from me. So it can be good for like preaching purposes, I found out. So I guess that has made me like more receptive to the details. One question that I kind of had that came up during this reading is, do the upper and lower planetary systems, do they experience yuga cycles as well? And then it started raining and I'm driving, so I can't talk anymore. I gotta go. Bye.
Jimena,
Well,
would you like to
that's a
comment?
question for you, Mother Lavanga. I don't think I could deal with that.
Okay. Actually, I think that would be a good question for Manath Maharaj, but according to my understanding, they do, because the yuga cycles are something in the material world. Satya, Traipa, Dwarpa. And so I always just thought that included all the planets. But that I've never had that question brought up before. So we need to, so Abby, write that down. So Maharaj, because Maharaj can probably talk about that in more detail in the next class. And also, I wanted to bring up, if that's okay with you, Mother Yumina, that what Abby was saying about how this particular section of the Bhagavatam, it may not appeal to everybody, but to some people it does. And that's really absolutely true. You know, it's described that Prabhupada's books are like a gulabjamun. Wherever you buy it, it's kind of sweet. But with that said, it's also, the Bhagavatam is also a Purana. And one of the topics that the Puranas deal with is the creation. So that's one of the reasons why you see this in there. And this specific Bhagavat Purana, you know, it deals with the topmost. It's the cream of all the Vedas. So of course, everything ultimately is going to be brought back to Krishna. And as I had mentioned in the previous class, all these things are kind of to prepare us to first understand the greatness of Krishna before we get into his most intimate pastimes. But with that said, you know, Bhaktivedanta Institute people, they read this stuff and they go into ecstasy. You know, like the PhDs. And I remember when I was in Gainesville, you know, the Bhaktivedanta Institute for ISKCON is there, the headquarters. And you know, it's all devotees that have like their master's degrees and like physics and their PhDs and like engineering, or you know, like different things like this. And they're all like, they sit and like they talk about, you know, how do we explain this stuff, and you know, how do we present these types of things. And they even have like nice conferences to talk about this stuff. And not only do they understand these things, but they also understand what like modern scientists are saying, so that they're able to actually have these educated discussions. And Prabhupada, he actually, that's why he wanted the Bhaktivedanta Institute, because he wanted to establish the Vedic viewpoint, which is also what the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium in Mayapur, my understanding at least, and if that's still the case, is that one of their goals was to present how the universe actually is, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, and to be able to explain this to the world. So yeah, I mean, this is it might be difficult for some to understand, but there's a group of people out there that read this and they get it and they can put it into more like simple language. And it's very good that we have that, because we see that there's a scientific basis also to like what we're talking about. It's not just like a very vague thing of like God created the world and that's it, but it's like no, there's these different planetary systems and these different areas within the material world, and beyond that there's a spiritual world. So, and of course, I'm sort of in the same similar situation as Abby, that I don't understand this 100%, that I feel that I could give a presentation on this to like people in a university, because I just I don't have like the educational qualifications, and I haven't taken classes on this stuff to have it explained to me to where I can understand it. But with that said, there are people out there that can. And so I relish our lectures. And then also there's other stuff in Bhagavatam too that I know I can present pretty well. So yeah, I mean, even if we're not able to understand it 100%, it's still purifying to hear about. Just to hear about how much detail there is, and that it makes you understand that we really can't make this up. Like nobody can make this up. This has to be, superior knowledge that's been passed down, and so I appreciate it a lot. And then the last point I wanted to add is that even though if this is your first read through it, it might be a bit difficult to understand. And I've read through this maybe 3 or 4 times in my life as I've gone through Bhagavatam, because it's a long work. So I've only gone through the whole thing about 3 or 4 times, and with verses and purports. But each time I go through it, I understand this a little bit better. So if you're feeling now that, oh, this is going just over my head, you take whatever realization you can get from it now, that, okay, yeah, I can see ultimately how this is all coming from Krishna, and it's part of his energy. And then the next time you go through it, you'll be able to get a little bit more. And even if you're interested in going deeper, I mean, there's lectures on this stuff. There's devotees that can explain this stuff. So yeah, just keep going with it. And as time goes on, we get more and more purified.
Very good. Yes.
This one.
I think now we can go on and read the last text in this chapter and see if we can somehow put it all together, summarizing in our minds what this chapter was about. And I invite Bhakti and Amy to read it. This is text 42.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Yamuna Devi Dasi. I'm just going to start with the verse. So, Burlokaha kalpitaha padbyam Bhuvar loko syana bitaha Swarlokaha kalpito murdna Iti valoka kalpana. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai. Others may divide the whole planetary system into 3 divisions, namely the lower planetary systems on the legs up to the earth, the middle planetary systems on the navel, and the upper planetary systems Swarloka from the chest to the head of the Supreme Personality. Purport. The 3 divisions of the complete planetary systems are here mentioned. 14 are imagined by others, and that is also explained. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the second canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Cause of All Causes. And I'm going to read the translation again. Others may divide the whole planetary system into 3 divisions, namely the lower planetary systems on the legs up to the earth, the middle planetary systems on the navel, and the upper planetary systems, Swarloka, from the chest to the head of the Supreme Personality.
Any comment to make on this very short verse and purport?
I have a question. Yeah. It said the 3 divisions of the complete planetary systems are here mentioned. 14 are imagined by others. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. So, okay, but my understanding was because the way I'm reading this, it sounds like it's saying the 14 are imaginary, but I thought it was the universal form that was imaginary. Am I reading?
Well,
Actually,
yeah, it's a bit confusing, yes, because here we are told to picture these different parts, and and although they are imaginary, and but these are real and the others are imaginary. That it is a little confusing. So
I
I
think
really
it's
don't know
because
what to tell you.
we can't really experience it until we're actually, I guess, liberated. No? Because like right now, all we can do is imagine it. Like it's we're reading it and it's like, wow. But it's even like inconceivable to us because we're conditioned. But if we were liberated, maybe we would be able to actually see that or know about it or something. But for now, it's like we're just imagining the other 14.
Yeah, maybe yeah, that's a good take. But because like we've been reading this chapter and talking about this universal form, and like I guess my understanding was we even have this map of how the material world is made up, and it has the 7 upper planets and the 7 lower, and then like the Earth in the middle. And so like my understanding is like that itself is like it's not illusory, like it actually exists. I mean, it might be temporary mostly, but the way it's being imagined, as in like the body of the Lord, that itself is like illusory to get people to understand the form of the Lord. But like I guess the way like things are written here, I was like, wait, is it saying that the 14 planets are illusory? Or do you understand what I'm getting at? Okay. All right. But anyway, I guess yeah, we need to get Maraj to clarify that in the next class. But yeah, Yamuni, you had mentioned summarizing this chapter. And remember, it started off with the 8 questions of Narada Muni, right?
Okay.
Asking Brahma, because he was wondering, who, you know, who's above you, like, because you created this material manifestation, and so he was basically curious to know like how things are manifested and who it is that Brahma meditates on, and so throughout this Brahma is explaining ultimately that he's not the supreme, that Krishna is the supreme, and that's who he's meditating on. And he's working on behalf of Krishna to engineer this planetary system. And then it goes into, well, let me go back a little bit. And then he explains not only the material creation, but he goes into detail to talk about the 3 modes of material nature and how that's manifest. But the ultimate point is that he's all doing it on behalf of Krishna. That's who he's meditating on. And then he gets into the universal form, which is a form to help us realize the personal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for those who are attracted to impersonalism. And then that's how the chapter ends. That's like a short summary.
Yeah, very good summary. Well,
I think that's a very good way. Sorry to interrupt, Jamuna. You wanted to say
no,
something?
no, I have nothing else to say. Go ahead.
I was thinking that just when you mentioned that lavanga, it sounds a little bit like kind of logical to take the impersonalist from thinking that God is like in nothingness or a void or something, and compare it to the space, which space holds the planetary systems. And then that's why it says that like the Virat Rupa is an imaginary form, like an illusory form, so that they can kind of grasp the idea that everything in the universe composes the Lord. So it's like the first form for the neophyte to actually relate to Krishna. After that, maybe going forward into the other chapters, or at some point in the spiritual progress of the neophyte, then he'll be able, or he or she will be able to actually relate to the personal form of the Lord. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's a very good realization and explanation, Amy. There was something else I was gonna say, but I forgot. So sorry, but yeah, I mean, I'm also looking at the next chapter, and we're gonna continue on with the discussion about the universal form. You know, Brahma's not done yet. So, but anyway, I think I mean, if you do you have anything else you'd like to add, Yuma?
No, I have nothing to add, and I don't really have any special announcements this week either. Just that next week, join us again, and Mother Lavanga will be leading us starting at the very beginning of chapter 6. So
All right.
we can look forward to that.
All right. All right. So here's to continuing more about the universal form key jai.
Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai,
Bharat
Manonatha
Maharaj ki
Maharaj.
jai.
Jai,
Jai.
Haribo.
Hare Krishna,
Haribol.
Hare Bol.
Thank you, everybody.